Hey, Terry Caliendo from Dedicated Managers here, and I am back. It hasn't been that long since the last one. I don't know, maybe it's been an hour. And so I've cleaned up this form, and I'll show it here in the diff file. It's probably the best way to do it. So I've gotten that form cleaned up. I'm pretty excited still. I've abstracted. I've taken all of these getters and setters, which had hard-coded, getter setter names. Calculate, they're computed function names actually. This is in the computed variable section, so they're computed variables, and so it's hard coded. I've been able to get rid of that, and so that the red stuff is what's gone, and what it's been replaced with is this this object that is my form fields configuration object that defines each of the fields. So I've got a field type of text, I've got, there's another text, and then I got a field type of date where I can send in the parameters for that. It doesn't make sense to have rules on that. I need to drop that. Well, maybe once it's, right now you can only use the menu, but once you can free type them, it would make sense to have rules. But anyway, there's a checkbox and a select. So those are just new components that I created that take those values and display them. So if you look at my structure here now, I've got the primary kinship caregiver. That is the view, the main view, that's this entire view. And within it is a form. And that form is right here now. And it is simply a div that loops over my config parameters. So now this is all dynamic. None of this is hard-coded. It's all dynamic and based on something that's in my data section down here. And so that's that configuration object that defines all the different fields in the form. And this is something, stuff that's in the data section, this is something I could go and get from a database somewhere. So ultimately, again, tying some front end into a database and then pulling the database parameters from here to do the output. This is an object that I can go get from somewhere. So now my application is becoming very, very dynamic. So my next step is to get this form into its own component, and rather than having it here in the kinship caregiver, this form is going to be passed down to a component that I'll pass the I'll basically pass the config to from this file, and then all my other forms, which would be something like this a kinship child form, it is the same thing, right? It's a form with some nested entities, some children. So this form can then use that same component to display its information and its child views. So again, the whole thing is being abstracted out, and so the code is becoming very efficient. Let's see if there was anything else I wanted to show in this. This was just a quick update. So these are the different form fields that I've created. I think I talked about them. They're being called in here from this shared directory. The different fields. And that's being called in to my main form through all these different imports of these different field types, and ultimately this and this will get moved down into a form component, and then in this just parent primary caregiver, I'll just call the form to display the form, and ultimately it's probably going to be some kind of template thing where I can have different layouts, but that'll be seen. That remains to be seen in the future. So again, back to the diff file, we got rid of all this hard-coded stuff. Hard-coded V model and hard-coded labels. They're now in this generic thing that's looped over based on my form fields. Here's the loop that happens, and it loops over the configuration object, and based on what the field type is within that configuration type, it calls the nested component, whether it's a text field, a date field, or a checkbox or a select field. And so I have to call those fields in. And then I have to turn them into components, and that's so this ties each of these fields, these files. These files get tied in via import They each get a name, which ends up here, and then that name gets tied to the component in the template section. Actually, here so that's that's each of these. Text dash field is this down here, and this is in my components section. And then in my data section, I've now got this configuration object. Where is it? This this whole thing is a configuration object. It looks goofy there because of the ignore white space, but it did some optimization with what I had there before. But anyway, all of these getters and setters are now gone. So it's now, if I create a new object, I'm no longer copying and pasting a getter and setter for each of those like I was doing before when I had to create a new object. If it was, surname, like I said in the last video, I'd have to copy and paste this and change all the values, and it was very prone to having mistakes. Now it's just a matter of copying this configuration object and pasting the configuration object and just changing a couple values. So very cool stuff. I'm very excited. It might not be apparent to you, watching this video yet. Hopefully, maybe once I abstract another level and turn this form into a component in itself, and then have the component and each of these entities in a template object that gets passed to, and this primary relationship giver view will ultimately become probably extinct and be part of just a configuration file that somehow passes those values in. Anyway, Terry Caliendo, Dedicated Managers. Hopefully that was somewhat understandable. Hopefully you can hear the excitement in my voice. This is a pretty big breakthrough for me in using Vue and understanding Vue. I'm very excited that I'm figuring it out through work. So leave some comments, questions, whatever. If you want to, if you're actually this far and still paying attention and watching all these videos, and you want to collaborate, would love to collaborate with somebody that has actually watched all these videos. That means you're interested. So you can hit me up at dedicatedmanagers.com. Anyway, have a great day and happy coding.